Welcome to Believing the Word with author and pastor Dan Shunk. This program is a ministry of Calvary Chapel Chambersburg in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. Here's what's coming up in today's message.
Okay, first thing we see is we're talking about the burial of everyone that died in this battle. How did they die? Well, clearly there was confusion. It could have been sword on sword, gun on gun. It could have been the earthquake. We're talking about fire and brimstone falling from heaven. People are going to die that way. And all these people are left all over the land. And we first of all talk about how after 7 months in verse 14, then they will pass through the land and find these dead bodies. And we're going to talk later about how they're going to mark that spot. It's interesting that you have a pause for 7 months before they even go bury the bodies.
Have you ever watched what's happening around us and felt hopeless? Are you all too aware of the prophetic tipping point we are facing today? Does it make you fearful? Well, Christian, fear not. Ezekiel 39 reminds us that God is faithful to his promises, fulfills his prophecies, restores his people, and pours out his Spirit on those who belong to him. No matter how fierce the opposition, God's victory is certain, his presence is enduring, and his glory will be revealed to all. Neither Gog nor our sinful hearts can separate us from our Savior. So take heart, stand fast, and join us in Ezekiel 39 for part 2 of Pastor Dan's message, Final Attack, God's Victory over Gog.
And in verse 2, I will turn you around and drive you on. Another way of saying that is I will drive you into confusion, is really the words. I will turn you around. I will drive you in confusion. I will take you up from the remotest parts of the north and bring you against the mountains of Israel. Doesn't it kind of give you the flavor that we're starting the story over, right? And that's kind of what we're doing. And he's going to give some different details this time. So this expression here in verse 2, I'm going to turn you around and drive you on. First of all, it's interesting that it says I'm going to turn you around. It's the beginning of the story, and he says I'm going to turn you around. It seems to be an indication in the language that Israel has another motivation at the time. There's something else they're involved with, but God says, no, I want you to go attack Israel now. God allows that to happen. So is it that they're still involved in Ukraine? Is it that they're still doing something else? And God says, nope, this is the time. Take a different direction. You're going to go down now towards Israel. Drive you on. Drive them into confusion. The words, these words actually come from the literal words of a sixth. So you may have a translation that says, I will leave but a sixth part of you. Maybe you have a translation that says that. That's that's the literal meaning of the words. And what it means is, I'm going to drive you to confusion. It doesn't necessarily mean there will just be a sixth part of them left. It means I'm going to cause a great confusion or a scattering. The words are talking about an annihilation by confusion is the idea. And when it says there, then in verse 2, I'm going to bring you against the mountains of Israel. This isn't just some analogy, is the point. This isn't just some, computer warfare only. Or, only, shutting down cyber things. No, this is a literal military attack. And God makes that clear in chapter 38 and here, that you're coming against the land. You're coming to the very land. It's a very literal military attack. Make no mistake about it. In verse 3, and I will strike your bow from your left hand and cause your arrows from your right hand to fall. You will fall on the mountains of Israel, you and all your troops and the peoples who are with you. Interesting, even here, right? Because we've been talking about how this isn't just a Russian attack. This is a Russian-led coalition of many nations. Even here in verse 4, I'm going to cause you and your troops, but then it also says, and the people who are with you. So even there, it's making it very, very clear. This isn't just one nation's attack. But it's their attack. Oh, and also all the other nations that are with you. Every step of the way, we're getting that kind of confirmation. Continuing verse 4, I will give you as food to every kind of predatory bird and beast of the field. You will fall on the open field, for it is I who have spoken, declares Lord Yahweh. Remember, by the way, and we mentioned this last time as well in chapter 38, it does no injustice to the text to be able to interpret the words like bow and arrow as words like missile and missile launcher. That does not do any injustice to the text. We talked about that last time. These are timeless ways of expressing a launcher and an arrow of some kind. In fact, isn't it fascinating that one of the more sophisticated modern weapon systems is actually called the arrow? I find that fascinating. Maybe the Lord knew that. He's like, I'm going to put it in there. It'll be a double meaning. Maybe. Very fascinating stuff. So it's okay to recognize that the Lord may have just put that in there as timeless language, but he knows exactly what it is that's going to happen. Verse 6, and I will send fire upon Magog. Wow. Wait a second. What is that again? Gog is the leader of the place of Magog. Gog is this leader of Russia. Magog is actually the Russian territory itself. Right? So he's going to send a fire upon Magog, the land of Magog, the place of Russia. This is new information. We didn't get this in the last chapter. In the last chapter, we're talking about this attack against Israel, in Israel, by Gog and his forces. And now we see in verse 6, I'm going to send a fire upon Magog and those who inhabit the coastlands securely, and they will know that I am Yahweh. Verse 7, and my holy name I will make known in the midst of my people Israel, and I will not let my holy name be profaned any longer. And the nations will know that I am Yahweh, the Holy One of Israel. Verse 8, behold, it is coming, and it shall be done, declares Lord Yahweh. This is the day of which I have spoken. In other words, I told you it was coming, and it's coming. And so we see a fire coming into the very land of Russia, but also to the coastlands. God brought this battle to Israel, but God brought the battle to Russia. In whatever capacity, however this happens, it doesn't tell us, but there seems to be an exchange between Russia and these coastlands living securely. Now, we already have a high reason to interpret last chapter where it talked about Western Europe and all the young lions thereof. We already have a high probability to interpret that as America. There's no reason to not think that this is talking about the same thing. It's either Western Europe and Russia or it's America and Russia, but there's some distant nation that is doing some type of exchange with Russia, which will lead to fire falling from the sky. Now, we don't know exactly how this is going to happen. I don't think the Lord necessarily needs us to know exactly how this is going to happen. Some of the reason some of these things are in here is so that when it comes to pass, what? You will know that I am Yahweh. I told you ahead of time. Remember that we don't have to know exactly how the Lord is going to fulfill every one of these prophecies for this to be important and for this to be amazing. I'll give you the analogy we've given before. It's the same as my password. If I say to you, my password is a mystery, you don't know my password, but it's kind of like this, and I start describing it to you, and you're like, okay, I could take a guess, but I don't really know what it is. It's murky. It's foggy. You don't really know. But the moment then I reveal it to you and I say, oh, here it is. Here's my password. Then now I get it. Right? So that when you finally get it, you'll know that that's my password. And I gave it to you. This is the same idea. The Lord is saying, look, I'm going to give you all these clues. I'm going to give you information for the general idea of how this is going to happen. But when it happens, you'll know it was me, because you'll see all of these characteristics coming to pass. You'll see them happen, and then you'll have no excuse but to say, wait, this is exactly what the Lord talked about, right? So whether these coastlands or Europe or America or whatever, when there is some exchange in which fire falls on Russia and the coastlands, everybody around, including specifically Israel, will be like, this is definitely what he talked about right here. So if this doesn't describe a nuclear exchange between the USA and Russia, I don't know what does. This gets certainly the closest to that, but we don't know for sure that that's what this is. But please notice, one of the important things here is that these things are affecting the whole world. This Russian attack against Israel is affecting everyone. That he says in verse 7, so that the nations will know that I am Yahweh. Remember back in last chapter in verse 20, it said in verse 20 that the whole earth would quake. Some type of earthquake that's shifting everything. In fact, there's a lot of good information to think that might be what the Lord uses to reestablish paradise on earth. There's good information that seems to indicate that part of what might have happened at the time of the flood is the axis of the earth shifted, which creates the seasons. The earth is at a perfect 23 1/3 degree tilt right now, which causes the seasons on the planet. If we didn't have that tilt, we wouldn't have seasons, and the earth could be in a perfect paradise. So maybe that's what's going to happen here. There's also, look up the wobble effect, how the earth is in a wobble right now. Have you ever spun a top and you're spinning the top and then all of a sudden at some point in the spin, it wobbles and it can recover from that, or it can wobble and then die, right? So many scholars tend to think that the earth that's spinning right now is going to go into this wobble that will cause these earthquakes, and then it will correct itself back at a perfect tilt again. So it could be exactly what the Lord's going to use. We know the Lord is calling for an earthquake all over the earth, and that could be one of the ways he does it. We'll find out. We'll watch from the balcony. Okay, if you're a believer, you'll watch from the balcony with me, but we will see how the Lord chooses to do these things in that day. I want to be clear. Many of these end times events we're going to watch from the balcony. We don't know exactly when this attack is going to happen, whether that is just before the rapture or just after. And somebody asked me that question, and we're going to get to that in just a second. So let's press on into verse 9. Yes, and this is actually about the part where we're going to start talking about the timing of all this. Verse 9. This goes into the next part, the fourth part of what I want to talk about. We talked about the scope of this attack and how it's going to affect the coastlands and the Russian homeland and everything. Well, now starting in verse 9, now we're going to see Gog's intentions are turned backwards. Everything they came to do is repelled, and that comes out now starting here in verse 9. Then those who inhabit the cities of Israel will go out, and they will make fires with the weapons and burn them, both shields and large shields. You might have shield and buckler there. Bows and arrows, war clubs and spears. And for 7 years they will make fires of them. They will not carry wood from the field or gather firewood from the forests, for they will make fires with the weapons. And they will take the spoil of those who made them into spoil, and they will seize the plunder of those who plundered them, declares Lord Yahweh. What great irony here. I mean, it's just like the Lord to take an enemy's attack and turn it around the exact opposite. Oh, you came to take a plunder? Well, guess what? Israel's going to benefit from your invasion. That's just like the Lord. Isn't that right, Haman? Okay, you get the point. So go back and read Esther. I love that. How the Lord at any minute can just turn things exactly backwards and say, oh, you meant harm? Oh, I'm going to turn it for good. Isn't that exactly what's said by Joseph of old? Do you remember that story? Joseph sold into slavery. And after Joseph and the brothers' father dies, the brothers start getting this indication like, oh man, now Joseph's going to get his revenge for when we sold him into slavery and we got rid of him. We told dad he was dead. Now he's going to want to get his revenge. And so they come begging up to their brother, Prince Joseph, after their father dies. And they're like, oh, listen, so you're going to treat us nice, right? That's my paraphrase. And what was Joseph's answer? You meant these things for evil, but God meant it for good, to send me ahead, to prepare the way, to preserve life. And so God knows how to take things that are meant for evil and just flip the script and turn it around. I think it's good for us to remember that. The next time we feel like somebody's attacking us, the enemy's attacking, the world's attacking, our own flesh is attacking, the Lord knows how to just completely 180 that the other direction. And that's exactly what happens to Russia right here. Those who intended to take spoil were going to be spoiled. And by the way, how ingenious of Israel to be able to take these implements of war and turn them into implements of warmth to heat their houses and everything, whatever these weapons are. And for 7 years, they're going to be able to fuel their nation. Doesn't that sound just like the Jewish nation? I know what I could do with these. I'll make money off of them. I will be able to warm our houses for years with these things. Ingenious that they'll be able to do this. There are people that have taken the time to go through the half-life of different nuclear components and uranium, lead, and potassium argon, all these different things, and you can get into that yourself. And they'll try to tell you that, listen, some of those half-lives come out to exactly 7 years that you could burn these fuels. And they would last for that period of time. So I'll let that up to you to research that. But interesting that it says that they'll be able to utilize these weapons for fuel for 7 years. I think there is a study worth having right there. So feel free to have that study. So he's taking these heat-seeking missiles and turning them into heat. So I love it. Just another indication, though, that we're dealing with some type of chemical, biological, radiological implements of war that Russia came against them with. So this 7 years of burning, though, of these weapons, that indicates not just a quantity of the fuels, but it also indicates the time that you're burning these radioactive fuels. So think about it in both ways. And it's not just how much the Russians brought with them, but how long they can then spend these things. This 7 years is also interesting and important for another reason, because we know from a biblical end time scenario that we have a 7-year tribulation that we're talking about in the end days. I'm going to blow this map up in just a second, this timeline here. But it indicates that this battle that we're talking about probably happens just before the 7-year tribulation starts. But I want to be clear about something that most people are not clear about on their timelines. And I just blow this up here a little bit for you to see that we always write our timelines in such a way that we say the rapture happens and then immediately the next second is the beginning of the 7-year tribulation. That is misleading to say it that way. There's no requirement for the rapture of the church to happen on the very day that the 7-year tribulation starts. There could be a period of time between the two. I don't think that period of time is very long, but there could be a period of time. So you could have the rapture, and then sometime after the rapture and before the start of that 7-year tribulation could be this battle. It's very well possible. The only point I want to make right now is the rapture and the beginning of that 7-year peace treaty with Israel from the Antichrist does not have to be on the same day. There could be a short period of time in there. But what we're talking about is there has to be 7 years left to burn these weapons. And we know after the 7-year tribulation is the second coming of Christ. The earth gets rejuvenated. All things are new on this earth, and it's a whole new deal. And so we have to have a 7-year period of time in there. So this attack either happens just before the rapture, or maybe it might even be the very excuse of the rapture. We're hearing about this worldwide earthquake that's happening. This could be the very thing that is utilized as an excuse by the unbelievers to explain away our deaths. Well, but we didn't die. We got raptured. Okay. So it either happens just before, during, or just after the rapture that these things happen. There is no way to have that any more narrowed down than that. So we'll see what the Lord wants to do for its timing. But there has to be 7 years from the time of this battle until that second coming. And so we go to verse 11 and we continue. Verse 11, and it will be in that day that I will give Gog a burial place there in Israel, the valley of those who pass by east of the sea. And, by the way, it's talking about the Dead Sea. East of the sea, and it will block off those who would pass by. So they will bury Gog there with all his multitude, and they will call it the Valley of Hamon-Gog. And verse 12, and for 7 months the house of Israel will be burying them in order to cleanse the land. We're reading a large section here, verse 13. Even all the people of the land will bury them, and it will be unto their name on the day that I glorify them, declares Lord Yahweh. They will set apart men who will continually pass through the land, burying those who were passing through, even those left on the surface of the ground, in order to cleanse it. So all of the dead bodies from this war, there'll be people that will be passing by. Oh, found another one, It's the idea. And at the end of 7 months, they will make a search. Again, let me read 2 more verses, and then I'll start talking about this. Verse 15, and those who pass through the land will pass through, and when anyone sees a man's bone, he will set up a marker by it until the buriers have buried it in the valley of Hamon-Gog. In verse 16, and even the name of the city will be Hamanan. so they will cleanse the land. Okay, first thing we see is we're talking about the burial of everyone that died in this battle. How did they die? Well, clearly there was confusion. It could have been sword on sword, gun on gun. It could have been the earthquake, people dying in the earthquake. We're talking about fire and brimstone falling from heaven. People are going to die that way. And all these people are left all over the land. And we first of all talk about how there is, after 7 months in verse 14, then they will pass through the land and find these dead bodies. And we're going to talk later about how they're going to mark that spot. And so it's interesting that you have a pause for 7 months before they even go bury the bodies. Again, indication we're probably talking about either chemical, biological, radiological warfare, or there's at least that fear that it's out there. And so they wait to go out and search through and find these bodies. But then what they're doing is their intention is then to collect all this up, cleanse the land, clean this up, they want to bury the dead in one common place. I'll keep that for just a second. Interesting. Napoleon, if you read about when the French under Napoleon invaded Russia and attacked Russia in 1812, they lost. Napoleon's forces lost hard and they retreated. And there are scattered mass graves all over, I want to say Russia, but really Lithuania, modern Lithuania today. They're all over the place. And they gathered them all up from Napoleon's battle that he lost. And there's mass graves that even in the last 10 years, they found more mass graves in Lithuania, specifically Vilnius, Lithuania is the biggest one they just found. And so this is the only thing you can do after these massive battles is just gather everybody up and put them in a common grave. That's what's being described here in this battle, that they're just going to gather them all up into one common place. So all Israel in these verses 11 through 16, all Israelites will play a part in recognizing dead bodies. And then for 7 months, there'll be specific people assigned to the burying of the dead that are out. And once identified, you don't touch them. You just identify them and you mark it. Again, indicates chemical, biological, radiological problems that they're concerned about here. Again, I want to read verse 15 again real quick. Verse 15, and those who pass through the land will pass through, and when anyone sees a man's bone, he will set a marker by it until the buriers have buried it in the valley of Hamon-Gog. And so when they find them, they don't say, oh, I found another dead body. Let me put on my rubber gloves and let me take care of this. No, they mark it because, again, an indication that there's a concern about contamination. And so professional hirers are set up to deal with this. All right, let's go on to verse 17. Now, as for you, son of man, so he's speaking specifically to Ezekiel, thus saith Lord Yahweh, say to every kind of bird and to every beast of the field, gather and come and assemble from every side to my sacrifice, which I am going to sacrifice for you, as a great sacrifice on the mountains of Israel, that you may eat flesh and drink blood. You will, in verse 18, you will eat the flesh of mighty men, and you will drink the blood of the princes of the earth, as though they were rams, lambs, goats, and bulls, all of them fatlings of Bashan. Verse 19, so you will eat fat until you are satisfied and drink blood until you are drunk. Again, he's talking to the fowls of the air and stuff. Until you are satisfied at my table with horses and charioteers, with mighty men and with men of war, declares Lord Yahweh. So look, let's clear something up now at this point. Let there be no mistake about this. This is not describing the Battle of Armageddon that happens. That is a completely different faction trying to fight against the Lord himself. There is one common denominator between the Battle of Armageddon and this battle, and it is this feature that in both cases, the Lord describes how at the end, birds of the air come and take care of cleaning things up. That's it. That's the only commonality. And yet you're going to find a lot of Bible commentators that merge these two battles into one. Don't let that happen in your mind. The Battle of Armageddon is at the very end of the 7-year tribulation. It's not Russia. It's the Antichrist and his forces that have come there to fight against the kings of the East. And God intervenes, stops the whole thing, and takes them out. There's totally different players, totally different timing. Don't confuse the two. But the Lord here indicates this will be cleaned up in the end. So also that one's in a valley. Har-Megiddo or Ar-Megiddo, that means Valley of Megiddo, whereas this is on the mountains of Israel, clearly, or all over the land.
You've been listening to Believing the Word, a ministry of author and pastor Dan Shunk at Calvary Chapel Chambersburg in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. Pastor Dan has been teaching through a series in the book of Ezekiel. We'd love to get connected with you and hear about how God is working in your life through this teaching program. You can reach us by phone at 717-500-1102. Again, that number is 717-500-1102. You can also check us out at our website at ccchambersburg.org, where you can learn more about the ministry of Calvary Chapel Chambersburg and find our chapter-by-chapter messages. If you're in the Chambersburg area, we'd love to have you join us Sunday mornings and Thursday evenings on 5121 Coffee Avenue. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be back with more from the book of Ezekiel. But until then, this has been Believing the Word with Pastor Dan Shunk.